Today at the Novethic event, you have been participating in the wake-up call session, which was intended to wake up the audience, mainly comprising of asset owners, about ESG issues. Please tell us what your talk was about and what was your core message.
Okay. My session and what I wanted to present to the audience was to focus on some terrible events which took place in Bangladesh earlier this year with the catastrophes of in the textile and apparel sector. So what happened was a number of factories, there was a factory collapse and there were over 1,000 people that were deceased as a result of that and several thousand people that were injured. Now what this really focused the mind of a number of stakeholders, not just investors, but first and foremost, of course, the people of Bangladesh, the workers who work in that sector who are affected every day by the poor labor and poor working conditions that they're exposed to, low salaries, etc. And then the reaction in the media. And in the press and the NGOs that were reacting as a result of this catastrophe, because it happened in April 2013, but this is not the first time we have heard about such events in what we call the supply chains of the global brands that we invest in, the companies that manufacture the clothes that we wear every day, and that we can buy on the street at the global brands that we all know. I think the main message was this is an issue for investors. There are risks involved. We own as shareholders on behalf of our clients the big names that we're talking about, the H&Ms, the Zara's, the companies or the stores that distribute sometimes the clothes manufactured in these countries. So the distributors, retail distributors like Carrefour, Walmart, Tesco, all these companies and their distributors are involved in a complex chain of manufacturing and outsourcing of these clothes that we wear, notably in Southeast Asia. So there's a risk there because, and this was the message that I wanted to, for the audience to take away, is that there are high risk, reputational risks, operational risks, and ultimately financial risks. Because we know, I think we all heard about the first time, at least in my mind, that this was seared in my mind, that such an event can be terrible for a company's reputation. So this is not a new issue, it's not a new risk. But I think what it shows is, in the interim, in those over 15 years, we still have an unresolved problem. Because the companies that, these companies that we invest in have set up monitoring of their supply chains, auditing of these supply chains. We have first-tier suppliers, second-tier, third-tier suppliers. In a sense, that supply chain is not being managed sufficiently well. And this is it's not just a moral issue, but it's also a material issue for all investors, because ultimately what this has repercussions on is the quality of the manufacturing quality of the clothes, the capacity of the suppliers to meet the high production demand, to meet the price requirements that are imposed on them in the contracts, but also the requirements to meet the social and environmental standards that these global brands are imposing upon them. Also pass on to the investors is that investors are responding to this. They have signed on a public statement which calls upon the global brands to really make a concerted effort to solve this problem once and for all. And that involves a number of aspects. The first is for these global brands to sign an accord for improved working conditions in these factories, and that would involve a financial commitment. So companies that sign on would actually be spending up to $500,000 a year to improve the safety standards in those factories. It would also involve a requirement to organize multi-stakeholder partnerships locally with trade unions, with government officials, with companies that they are subcontracting to in order to improve the overall quality and labor standards in that environment in Bangladesh. And then finally, that there would be a public disclosure. These companies, the global brands, will publicly disclose not only the names of their suppliers and their subcontractors, but also the results of the audits that they conduct locally. I think this is really demonstrating something that we as investors view quite positively. That's why we signed on to that letter. like many other investors, and I think we will see how that plays out. We noticed there's a competing initiative that has been now launched by mainly US-based companies, the Gap, thinking of Gap, thinking of Walmart. I think our concern as investors is always that there be a level playing field and that we not have different levels of transparency or different levels of requirements imposed upon companies in the same sector. So we'll be quite closely observing whether the European initiative has more take-up and whether that is actually what is implemented as a worldwide standard, or whether the US initiative, which at this point has not garnered as much support, but nonetheless we do see these two initiatives, how they will play out is very important. And as I think what the next step to signing on to that collective initiative and this letter is that we will be following up in our engagement with companies directly on a bilateral basis, both with the US companies and the European companies, to see how this is playing out, how they're meeting to their engagements that they've signed up to, and what they see as the advantages and inconveniences to having signed up to these initiatives.